The story happened to me in America when I worked as a long-haul truck driver for Volvo. Let me tell you about an exciting incident. I was transporting a grain load in August 2009 from Phoenix to San Diego. I decided to drive at night to avoid the daytime heat. However, due to the heavy bag and scorching road, my tires started to blow out. I replaced one, drove a few miles, and two more tires blew out. I didn't have any spare tires left. That's when I saw a grave by the side of the road, and behind a fence, there was a wheel from a Volvo truck. Previously, a Volvo driver had crashed there, and his relatives had left this wheel at his grave. I approached the tomb, took the wheel, and said, "I apologize for the audacity, but I need to reach the port where they are waiting for me with the grain. I'll return the wheel on my way back." I replaced the wheel and continued my journey. Everything went smoothly at the port. I unloaded and forgot about the wheel. Several months passed, and I had to go to San Diego again. I arrived, waited for the load, and dozed off in the cabin. Then, I had a strange dream. It was raining heavily, and I was sitting in my truck. A man in his 40s wearing a raincoat approached my vehicle. He came closer and said, "Hey, buddy, why haven't you returned my wheel? You took it, and now you're not planning to give it back. I'd punish you. But I pity a young fool like you. Spare him, buddy. Return the wheel. Don't lead me to sin." At that moment, I woke up and remembered the wheel. I quickly loaded up and drove back to that spot. I removed the wheel and returned it to the grave. I looked at a photo and realized that he was the man who had come to me in my dream. I said, "I'm sorry. I took it and forgot, but now I'm returning it. And as a token of my appreciation, here's a bottle of Red Horse whiskey. Thank you. And sorry again." I got back in my truck and headed for the unloading. After arriving at the port in San Diego, I went to bed late at night. And once again, I dreamt of the same man. He approached me and said, "I'm not angry with you. You forgot. It happens. Thanks for the bottle." And he walked away. Now, I work in a different job driving a different type of truck, and I no longer visit those places, but I still remember that late trucker. May he rest in peace. This story took place in Russia when I was working as a long-haul truck driver on a KAMAZ truck. Let me tell you about a mysterious and enigmatic event on a winter night near Akhtubinsk. It was November 1994. My partner and I were heading home from the Moscow region to Akhtubinsk, transporting several tons of fresh frozen fish on our KAMAZ. This journey was far from simple. Everything didn't go as planned. The road had temporary delays, and the truck broke down twice. The round trip covered 3,000 versts, and we spent nearly a week on the road. We were tired. At the moment when all of this happened, I was behind the wheel, driving the truck for almost 8 hours straight. Our schedule had gone awry, and we drove at maximum speed wherever conditions allowed. I was in a hurry to get back home. My wife and I were supposed to attend the wedding of close friends. It was a night. The sky was covered in a gray haze, and only occasionally did the silvery moonlight break through it, giving us visibility, a snow-covered road, and everything in front of us. It was well past midnight. Soft music played on the radio, and my tired partner was lying in the bike, occasionally snoring. The road surface was smooth, not shaking or dusty. There wasn't a soul on the road, just my partner and me in our lonely KAMAZ truck, heading toward the Caspian Sea. Suddenly, the gray haze again obscured the moon, and the night darkness became even denser. Visibility decreased, so I slowed down, and it turned out to be a good decision. Suddenly, in the distance, in the glare of headlights, I saw a rider on a horse moving right in the middle of the road. A herd of cows was dragging behind him, perpendicular to the highway. I slammed on the brakes. Our multi-ton truck stopped just a few meters from this mass of horns and hooves. In frustration, I uttered a few choice words. In response, I heard the disgruntled mooing of cows and the shouts of shepherds. I couldn't understand why these bulls were here in the middle of winter. Where were they headed? And why was all of this happening in the middle of the night? The herd was huge, and it moved like a multicolored river. About 5 minutes passed, but they kept moving. I left the cabin, stretched my legs, and breathed the cold air. But as soon as I reached for the door handle, all the animals suddenly disappeared. I froze in amazement. There were no cows or their shepherds in sight. I even checked the roadside, but there were no tracks. The shiver gripped me. I thought, this must be a miracle. It was so real. It seemed like I had overworked myself. Somewhere ahead, there should be a small town on the route. There were about 20 kilometers left. I decided that as soon as I reached it, I would park the truck in a parking lot and get some rest. I returned to the cabin and continued driving, and then suddenly, I found myself on the central street of an unfamiliar city. I looked around in astonishment. Like a Christmas tree, the entire road and its buildings were brightly lit. It was something I had never seen before, not even in Moscow. I noticed electronic billboards displaying the time. 3 o'clock in the morning. In the 90s, the streets of cities were usually deserted at this hour, but here, I saw an astonishingly large number of people for a winter night in 1994 in a small town. I approached an intersection where the red traffic light was on. I stopped the Kamaz. I looked around, trying to understand what was happening. This couldn't be Aktubinsk. It was too far away. Furthermore, I was supposed to make a turn before reaching it. It was impossible. Suddenly, I realized the traffic light had been red for an unusually long time. Was it malfunctioning? I looked left and right, feeling a growing sense of unease, and then something in the surroundings began to unsettle me. I shook my head in disbelief. The entire city and its streets had disappeared. They dissolved into thin air, and I was in an empty wilderness. I understood that I had just been in an incomprehensible, ghostly city. I took a deep breath to calm my trembling and continued driving. Perhaps fatigue had caught up with me, and I had fallen asleep at the wheel. But what or who had awakened me with a sudden jolt remains a mystery today. My partner continued to sleep, seemingly undisturbed. As I continued my journey, I couldn't shake my curiosity about the ghostly city I had inadvertently passed through that night. I had driven along this route multiple times before and after that, but never before had any signs of a city on that stretch of road. I have been a truck driver for a long time, and throughout my extensive life, I have seen a lot. But after what I witnessed on that trip, I began to pray before every journey. Not long ago, I jumped behind the wheel without thinking about anything, and I never even had time to think about a prayer. However, what happened to me completely changed my life. This is my most horrifying trucker story. I must clarify that I had never even thought about anything supernatural, and in general, the supernatural was beyond my understanding. But it so happened that I accidentally, against my will, became the subject of an incredible incident. It happened when my route led me through the Altai region. The full moon illuminated the starry sky. The night was so bright that I could see the neighboring areas perfectly. I want to emphasize that I was never afraid, even on nights, as my truck had excellent headlights for short and long distances. That night, my only concern was that I had been behind the wheel for 3 days already, and the energy drinks I had consumed since the evening were starting to lose their effect. I was longing for sleep. Thoughts of reaching my destination were constantly on my mind, and all I wanted was to lay down and get some rest. Then head to the sauna in the morning and enjoy some beer with fish. However, what troubled me was one seemingly minor thing. I had not encountered a single car for 3 hours on the road. No oncoming traffic or vehicles were driving in the same direction. It was as if the road was deserted, as if some invisible thread kept everyone away. I tried to reassure myself, thinking it was a quiet night and most people were at home or in roadside hotels. I turned on the radio, and at the same time, I glanced in the side mirror and noticed something strange. Lowering the window carefully, I looked outside into the darkness and was suddenly gripped by fear. Just a couple of meters from my truck, there was some creature running, resembling a dog. However, it was much larger than an ordinary dog, enormous and more significant than a horse. Trying to maintain my composure, I pressed the gas pedal harder, but the creature continued to run alongside me, matching my speed of 60 kilometers per hour. It was speedy. My attempt to outrun it was futile. Through dark woods and endless fields, we raced together, and in the creature's eyes, there was an otherworldly wisdom, an understanding of all my fears. It was like a supernatural being sent to confront my worst nightmare. I had no time for reflection. My entire focus was keeping the truck on the road and avoiding falling into the abyss of fear. I felt like this creature could see into me, know my fears and weaknesses, and be ready to exploit them. When I finally saw the lights of a distant town, my heart began to race. But instead of relief, I felt terror because the creature remained by my side. It was as if it couldn't be shaken off. My truck sped into the town, and I felt the creature disappear. It was something beyond human, like a ghost, leaving me as I entered the city. I was alone inside the store, and the female cashier stood motionless, like a dummy. I felt like I was at the crossroads of two worlds, that my life had been staked, and something otherworldly was ready to take me. And when I finally collapsed into bed, I realized I had experienced something beyond my comprehension. Something had saved me and allowed me to reach the end of this road without incident. But now I pray before every trip not to cross that dark path again, and not to encounter the creature that knows all my fears and thirsts for my soul.